proceed, our next speaker is Dr. Clint Beyerman. Dr. Clint Beyerman is the new assistant professor here at the Northwestern Ag Research Center. He started in July. He's got a few studies on the ground already as fast as he can. The title of his presentation is What's in the Tank? That is a really interesting topic for sure. Without further ado, here's Clint Beyerman.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Clint Beyerman. Going to stand up here. I'll shut the video off, but just wanted to say hi and hope everyone's doing well. Thank you for the introduction, Jessica. And now we'll start the presentation. Let's get started. So the title of my talk, What's in the Tank? I wanted to talk to everyone today about adjuvants, the things you're putting in the tank with your herbicide and insecticide or fungicide applications, and hopefully going to be talking a lot in future years about different herbicide research going on here. But I thought since this year I don't have any ongoing studies to talk about that involve herbicides, that it'd be a good year just to cover some general information about adjuvants, because it can be a really good refresher about the importance of them, what they're doing, and it was a good refresher for myself just going back through adjuvant information. So to start out, the definition of an adjuvant is any substance in a herbicide formulation or added to the spray tank to improve the herbicidal activity or the application characteristics. So this is anything we're adding to the tank to affect how the herbicide performs that's not the herbicide itself. And some adjuvants are already in your formulated products that were already added by the manufacturer, and some of those adjuvants you're adding yourself into the spray tank on the days you spray. So a lot of information with herbicide starts at the label. And when you do go through the label, a lot of labels do make some general adjuvant recommendations. And so if you're unsure of a certain product, if you're using all the adjuvants you need, the label is a good place to start. It's not always all there, but good place to start. So considerations that need to be made with adjuvants mainly include the product you're applying or multiple products in a tank mix, your water source, the spray water you're using, the quality of that water and some of the characteristics affect the adjuvants you need. Also the environment you're applying in. If you're applying on a really hot day or before a rainstorm, you may want to think about some different adjuvants. And then your targeted pest. So most of the information I'll cover today is in regards to herbicides. So the size of the weeds you're after, or the species in some situations, but that could also include the insect you're spraying an insecticide for, or fungicide application. Those are considerations as well. So I'm going to start out with water conditioners. This is the first adjuvant type, and they're very important. It's going to be what you normally add first in the mixing order. And a water conditioner is an adjuvant that bonds with mineral ions in the water. And ammonium sulfate is a standard water conditioning agent. And ammonium sulfate is important because it binds to calcium and magnesium in the water and other dissolved minerals. And if these calcium and magnesium ions in the water bond with ammonium sulfate, they're tied up and they won't bind to your herbicide that you're adding in afterward. So that's why they're really important. So it ties up those minerals, making them less active, and ammonium sulfate is the standard for a water conditioning nitrogen source. Using dry AMS has been a standard for a lot of years, but there are some liquid products available also that work fine. Just make sure that you're using a liquid product at a high enough rate to tie up all those minerals in your water. So I had a water test done on our water here at the station just to get a background idea, and we have relatively hard water here at Creston. Not the hardest ever, but we do have considerable amounts of calcium, magnesium, and our total hardness, which is the sum of a bunch of different soluble minerals, is 162, and the USGS deems anything between 121 and 180 as hard water. So we're not in the extreme hardness level, but there's definitely considerable calcium and magnesium here. So it would be very important to use a water conditioning source to tie up those minerals. And this is very important when you're using the herbicides glyphosate and glufosinate, because when those minerals bind to glyphosate and glufosinate, they're in a less plant available form. So by not using a water conditioner, you're potentially reducing the amount of herbicide that's going to get into your targeted weed species. Nitrogen source, I wanted to cover this along with water conditioning agents because with a lot of different herbicides, having some form of nitrogen in the tank is important. And in most situations, that nitrogen source is the ammonium sulfate that you're using, which is very important, again, for glyphosate and glufosinate. But there's research that shows a lot of herbicides that are systemic just benefit in activity from having a nitrogen source in the tank. And in a small grains region, that's really important because your group 4s, your synthetic auxins, also your group 2s, those are commonly used systemic herbicides. And both of those herbicide types, you should see increased activity by having a nitrogen source in the tank. Moving on from water conditioners to surfactants. Surfactants are very important, and their main purpose is to reduce the surface tension of water. And sometimes they're referred to as wetters and spreaders, and that's referring to their surface tension lowering characteristics. So when you lower the surface tension of water, that's what your dish soap does. It allows it to reach into smaller crevices. It just creates smaller droplets. So that's where the term wetters and spreaders comes from. And this allows your droplets to spread, increasing your leaf coverage. So your targeted plant that you're spraying onto, you're covering a greater surface area of that plant. And also your surfactants, beyond increasing coverage, can enhance herbicide uptake. So here's some photos that we took here in the lab, and the one on the left is just our tap water here at Creston, and that's one droplet on a leaf. And then the other picture is the same water source, but with 0.25% per volume non-ionic surfactant added. And we see that drastic effect where that droplet has spread out much wider. It's much thinner depth, but it's covering so much more of the leaf surface. And that's really the goal in an application. When your herbicides are evenly mixed, there should be the same amount of herbicide in both of those droplets if it's the same volume of water. But when you reduce that surface tension, a lot more herbicide is going to get into that leaf on the right when there's so much more surface area for that uptake to take place. Other adjuvants are oil-based adjuvants. These are other surfactants, or many of these oil-based adjuvants contain surfactants, but commonly used with herbicides are crop oil concentrate, methylated seed oils, and then the really high performer, your high surfactant oil concentrate. And all three of these could include some small level of non-ionic surfactant with them to help lower surface tension, and definitely your high surfactant oil concentrate will. But the main point of having oil in an adjuvant is to increase penetration of the leaf and to increase uptake. So again, it's helpful in getting herbicides to penetrate through leaf barriers. So this is important to consider when you're targeting larger weeds. So generally, applications made early in the season, you're probably targeting some smaller weeds if they haven't had as much time to grow. So non-ionic surfactant may be sufficient for herbicide uptake. But as the year goes on, those weeds get larger. A larger weed is probably going to have a thicker cuticle, just thicker leaf barriers on any larger plant. So that's when I definitely think about adding in an oil-based adjuvant. And again, that mixture just penetrates more by having oil in those droplets. Another consideration, though, is when you're spraying in crop, when you include an oil-based adjuvant, if you're getting greater penetration on your weed species leaves, you're also going to get greater penetration on your crop leaves. So you may see some burning and spotting of your crop. So there's some injury to take into consideration when using an oil-based adjuvant. So I said oil-based adjuvant spread as well. Here's a water droplet and then a water droplet with 1% per volume crop oil concentrate. And we see how that the top of that droplet's a lot shinier. So we can see that oil's present. But we do see that spreading effect like we saw with non-ionic surfactant. And again, with our high surfactant oil concentrate, so this has a full load of surfactant plus oils, and we see that really superior spreading on this. We can see just the edge of that droplet, but that it's really thin in comparison to just water alone. It's really domed up, round type of droplet. So those are the adjuvant types I wanted to cover in depth, but just to talk about some other types of adjuvants, there's a lot of other things out there that can help with specific spraying issues. There are compatibility agents, and a compatibility agent should be used anytime you have multiple products in the tank that could have some antagonism, that might not mix well together, that want to form a precipitate. This can have to do sometimes when you're using a high amount of fertilizer with a herbicide application or specific insecticides. You may need a compatibility agent, and this is one to refer to the label if you're making a really complex mixture. Emulsifying agents. In a lot of formulated products, an emulsifying agent is probably already present from the manufacturer, but this is just an adjuvant that's helping get that product into suspension faster. And into suspension, I mean mixed evenly throughout the entire tank. And it takes time from when you mix to get that mixture even throughout the tank. And this can just help speed up that process. Also, anti-foaming agents. Certain products, when you mix them and you're agitating, they just like to foam a lot. And this can slow you down when you're mixing, or you just get to the end of the field and you have a lot of foam in your tank. You could consider an anti-foaming agent, might speed up your mixing process. And then there's also drift control agents. And drift control agents help cut down on your small droplets and can help reduce potential drift. If you're spraying in windy conditions or spraying a herbicide that's really prone to drift, you could consider using a drift control agent. So again, not a lot of specifics on these products, but just going over them is a really good reminder that if you have a certain issue with chemical application, there's a lot of different types of adjuvants out there that you may consider in different scenarios. I wanted to cover the mixing order today because order is really important with these adjuvants in your products. So always you want to add your water conditioner first, whether that's AMS or you're using urea ammonium nitrate as your nitrogen source. But it's very important that you get that in the water first, because again, when you get that in there, then it's the AMS that's binding to all those minerals in your water, and you need that to happen before your herbicides go in so that your herbicides aren't the molecules binding up with all those minerals. So get your water conditioner in the tank first, and then if you're using any dry formulated products, any of your wettable powders or dry flowables, Those go in the tank next. Then your liquid chemical products, whether that's an emulsifiable concentrate or a sprayable liquid, and then your surfactants go in last. If it's and the three I covered, your non-ionic crop oil or MSO, whichever you're using, those would go in last, and then make sure you have adequate time for agitation to everything to get into suspension. And again, check your specific product labels. If it's a product you're using a lot or have for years, it may be a good idea to check back in that label and make sure that you're using the right adjuvants to get the best performance. So I looked at just a couple products. I just picked a couple small grains products that, just to review the label, just to see what it said in regards to mixing or adjuvants, just to see what was out there. I just picked two random products, not trying to highlight anything, but I looked through the Open Sky label, and the specifics it did give in the label in regards to adjuvants and mixing were to first add your water conditioning agent, which is really good advice, then mix in your Open Sky, and then add your surfactants last. And then as far as compatibility or do's and do nots, it said do not mix this product with dicamba, MCPA, or 2,4-D. So when you see that, you'll know, okay, there's combinations I shouldn't do. And then also do not mix with organophosphate insecticides. So if when you were making a post pass across some wheat with this product and for some reason you needed an insecticide, you would not want to put that in the tank with this or make a different application strategy, because when they put that in the label, that's indication that something bad is going to happen in your sprayer if you put it in with an insecticide, or a really negative, potentially crop injury. It could be that as well. But do's and don'ts. And then tried another small grains product and went through, and it didn't have quite the specifics. So it didn't list any compatible tank mix part, or it listed many compatible tank mix partners that you could include. The only do not do was don't mix it with dicamba, and then it also didn't have anything specific about adjuvants. So it shows that just because one label's really specific about adjuvants or tank mix partners, other labels aren't. So if you're not finding this information you need to know, you should talk to your retailer about, because they'll have a lot of experience with what it's safe to mix it with and the success other people have had with varied adjuvants. So issues I've seen with adjuvants, in my experience, you need to know your formulated products. People get into trouble if they think that one herbicide product they're adding in the mix has enough adjuvants already in it, and it doesn't. I've seen people make really expensive applications with many herbicides in the tank, and they didn't add enough adjuvant because they thought, oh, this generic glyphosate they bought, it already has all the adjuvants in it we need. So they make a really expensive application with a lot of herbicides, and they don't see great weed control over something they should have, an adjuvant they should have added that wouldn't have cost that much money, and then they don't get the weed control they wanted. Also, spraying from different water sources is something to look out for. A lot of people may have a good idea of how hard your water source is at your home place if you're used to spraying from one water source. And you need to know how hard your water is so that you're using enough water conditioner to get the water ready. But if you're farming in different places, or you just started leasing a place and it's 6 miles down the road, and when you're going to spray there, you're going to pump it out of a different well, your spray water, hardness can vary a fair bit in a geographic region. So it may be a good idea to know your water sources if you're spraying somewhere else. So those are different things. And also just talking to your retailer. Your retailer's going to know a lot about compatibility and which adjuvants that other people are having success with. So those are those are things to consider. I'll take questions now, and I'll photo credit to Jessica Pavelka, who just joined the agronomy lab, and she took those awesome water droplet photos.